Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for coming on an August time. Many people are on vacation, and a lot of times in August, we have a lower amount of people, but it's great to see everybody here. Okay, welcome. And I'm Kimberly Collins. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the director of the Leonard Transportation Center, and welcome to our fourth dialogue for 2024. Today, we are talking about strategies for strengthening the Inland Empire's transportation workforce. And if you think that's a super broad topic, it is. So we're going to have our speakers today really try and delve into the many faceted areas of the transportation workforce, which goes from everywhere from many of the supply chain companies we have working in Amazon or other firms that are part of the global e-economy, up to engineers and individuals doing construction and building and planning and working on how our communities are going to look, as well as we're here at Omnitrans, public transportation professionals, right? Working to deliver people and move them around communities. So, I mean, there's just so many others as well. But yeah, we're going to try and really look at these different layers of the transportation workforce and what it means for the Inland Empire. And then really thinking, how do we bring it together and how do we support it and how do we make sure that it's, gets over its challenges and moves forward in the most positive way. So with that, we have our sponsors that I'd like to thank quickly. We have HNTB, of course. It's been a major sponsor and mentor of this program. San Bernardino International Airport and Ontario International Airport. So the next dialogue, I hope that you can all join us, we'll be talking about aviation and the linkages to surface transportation. There's some very exciting things that we've talked about in other dialogues that are going on in the Inland Empire, and we're going to delve further into those. We also have our gold sponsors, Woodruff and SoCal Gas, Omnitrans. Thank you, Omnitrans, for sponsoring us, but also providing us this wonderful space that we've been able to use, and the U.S. National Science Foundation. And then, of course, a number of our silver sponsors, the GLA, VSC Environmental, Metrolink, Theodora Oranger, EXP, Lane, SCAG, Sarusa, and Foothill Transit. Thank you, Foothill Transit. I know you're up there somewhere in the cyberland, so thank you so much for also being a sponsor and a part of the committee to plan this. With that, I'd like to invite up a special and honorary guest. No, not really a guest, but an honorary figure in our college, at least with the Jack Brown College of Business and Public Administration, Dean Tomas Gomez Arayas, to say a few words.
Thank you, Kim. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. And a very special thank you to our friends at Omnitrans, Erin Rogers, and all her colleagues who have made it possible for us to use these facilities and their support. It's a fantastic venue. So thank you. Also thank you to Matt Bushman and HNTB for joining us today and for their support. And I also want to thank the speakers for today's topic. Strengthening workforce is part of what we do as an educational institution. College education is as much about workforce preparation and being ready to be productive members of society as personal growth and personal development. And that's something we are very committed to Cal State San Bernardino. Our speakers are fantastic for today. I'm looking forward to hearing from them. Terry Bills from ESRI and Bradley Gates, the Workforce Development Director at San Bernardino County Workforce Development Department, and Christine Glass, the Director of Human Resources at Omnitrans. And I also want to thank the people who planned this, because sometimes they work in the background and we don't see them. Erin Rogers and Doran Barnes and Josh Landis from Foothill Transit, not only Bud Bushman at HNTB, but also his colleague Carrie Witt, Michelle Casey from the San Bernardino International Airport, and Otis Greer from SBCTA. So thank you all. Thank you all for being here, for participating, for being engaged in something that we also care about. As you are here to listen to the people who actually know about this stuff instead of me. Thanks again. And Kim, the microphone is yours.
All right, thank you, Dean. And now I'd like to invite up Matt Bushman from HNTB to say a few words.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Matt Bushman. I'm with HNTB. I'm a lifelong resident of the Inland Empire. So born here, grew up here, came back here to work. So I'm happy to see that events like this exist here in the Inland Empire, that we don't have to always travel, but we get to talk about the issues that are going on in and around our community. I serve as the group director for HNTB in the Ontario office, and we do transportation projects exclusively, and much of the work that we do is right here in the Inland Empire. So we have some exciting kind of milestones upcoming on the I-10 project with SBCTA. We have some exciting work with Brightline and other projects. So transformational transportation projects are happening here, and it's an honor to be a part of that. HNTB, as she mentioned, is a founding partner, not me, but happy to carry on the legacy of supporting Leonard Transportation Center, and thankful to Kimberly and her team for everything they do, really, and everything they've accomplished over the past 7 years. And also just, of course, thank you to Aaron Rodgers and Omnitrans for hosting. It's a great room, and it's great to be in person as opposed to only online. To have the option available, even the reason we 2 minutes late was because we were getting to be here, seeing each other and talking. So that's the special part about this. And then the last thing I'll say is I do have a special interest in the topic today, workforce development, especially as it relates to kind of, in my case, higher education. I taught for a while at a university, a few courses in transportation engineering, serve on an engineering board, and then get to support this. So I'm excited to see the conversation today around building up the workforce for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. It's always great to see you and to work with you. Now, for our final introductions, well, they were listed first on our agenda, but we're going to bring up Omnitrans, Aaron Rodgers, just to say a few words as our sponsor.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So great to see everyone. Thank you for being here. The title we have today, as you know, is Strengthening Strategies for the Inland Empire's Transportation Workforce. It's a wonderful topic. Thank you to Dr. Collins and her team for the partnership. We really enjoy being a part of this process, and it's been very important to our organization. And also, everyone up here is saying, thank you, Aaron Rodgers. I want to thank our Omnitrans team. Many of them are in here, in particular, our IT team. Matthew Jones is here from our IT team. Yes, we have the room, but the reason the room works so well is that it's equipped to do what we're doing, right? We have the hybrid setup. And so many other members of our team are here. Thank you to RSLE and everyone who helped set up the facilities team. So yes, I appreciate you saying thank you to me, but I want to make sure my team is also thanked as well. We became a partner in this in 2018. I sit on the advisory council as well as the planning committee for these events. I know I haven't been that reliable on the planning committee lately, a lot of conflicts. But anyway, brief background about Omnitrans. We were established in 1976 under a joint powers agreement. And in the next few years, we'll be celebrating our 50th year here in the Inland Empire. So we carry about 7 million passengers a year right now. We have a 480 square mile service area, so quite large, covering 15 cities and portions of unincorporated San Bernardino County. So we are the largest mobility provider in San Bernardino County, which you all know is the largest county in the country, right? And so we take very seriously both our role as mobility provider as well as our role as being a major employer in this region. For today's presentation, as you already heard, you're going to hear from 3 great speakers. I'm a little partial to one of them, our very own Director of Human Resources, Christine Glass. And workforce is a topic of extreme importance to us because without the people of Omnitrans, the people who work here, we would not be able to deliver on our mission every day, right? Which is to connect the communities we serve and strengthen the economy. You're going to hear today from us about the challenges we've had, as well as the tools that we've used to begin to overcome some of those challenges. And it's our goal to positively impact not only the region by providing mobility, but also to positively impact the lives of the people who work here. And you're going to hear about that. And when I say that, I mean career paths, career opportunities, ending generational poverty in some cases, and really getting people to see what all the possibilities are. Again, we're excited to have you here today. I brought a prop to prove to you that what we're doing is making a difference. This is a certificate of congressional recognition to Omnitrans from Congresswoman Norma Torres. And I just want to read to you one small thing it says. Your efforts in providing meaningful employment opportunities contribute to our region's economic success. You'll notice strengthen the economy is in our vision statement. What we're doing is strengthening the economy. May you continue to support veterans and their reintegration into civilian life. This was because our team participated in a veterans job fair. Thank you, Dieter. I know Dieter was there. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Collins for our first speaker. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome. Thank you we have a lot going on out there on our facility right now. So hopefully that wasn't too inconvenient. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. And so just as a reminder, these are dialogues. We're trying not to have just talking heads, but we want to have an engagement around the material. So you'll have a chance to have discussions after we hear from our three speakers. But we also put forward audience poll questions that we'd like you to look at. And for those who are online, there is a full agenda for the Spark. There's a Spark code for those who want to see the full bios of our speakers, as well as the overall program for today's event. And you can as well get that online. And now we'll go to our first poll question. So we have, as those of you who have been here before know, these aren't difficult questions. They're not scientific questions. They're just questions to get us start thinking about the issues. So the first question we have for you, what do you think is the most important factor in preparing the future workforce for transportation careers? And we have expanding training centers and educational programs, providing clear career pathways and job projections, highlighting diverse job opportunities in the sector, partnering with industry leaders for hands-on experience, or all of the above. And oh, look at that. Large surprise, 100% all of the above. But if you look at that list, it's a very difficult list to complete. So yeah, but we do need to have all of the above. Okay, with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker for today, Bradley Gates, who is the director of the San Bernardino County Workforce Development Board and the Workforce Development Department. So Bradley, stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Collins. And I apologize that I'm not there with you in person today. I would much rather be with you than here sitting at my desk. But isn't technology amazing to allow us to connect wherever we are, right? So yes, as Dr. Collins mentioned in the beginning, this is a huge topic, a huge subject, something that's very difficult to capture, especially in one 15-minute presentation. And so I will do my best. But I really see today's conversation as really just the beginning of lots of future conversations as we strengthen our collaboration and partnerships together to tackle this big, important subject. So I represent the Workforce Development Board for San Bernardino County. And the way that I sum up what we do is that our job is to help every county resident who wants to get a good job, help them get that job. And then in addition, or in collaboration with that, our job is also to help ensure that every business in San Bernardino County is able to hire and attract and retain the qualified talent that they need for their business to be successful. And so I wanted to begin my presentation today with highlighting just some of the high-level labor market data that exists here in our county to kind of set the stage for our conversation. So here in San Bernardino County, we have a labor force of over 1 million adults. It's been that way since September of 2022. And so that was a huge milestone that our county achieved back then. And we've maintained that milestone ever since. And basically what that means is a lot of people have moved to our area over this last decade. And hence our labor force is increasing so much. And for the last few years, we've had a very relatively healthy, stable employment base and unemployment rate. It did tick up slightly in June. Our local unemployment rate is now 5.2%, but that was due mostly in part to the labor force increasing pretty substantially from May to June. So bottom line, employment is still really healthy here in our county. And I want to also highlight that as of the end of 2023, so about 6 months ago, we had just over 840,000 jobs in San Bernardino County. And I highlight that because obviously if we have a labor force of more than 1 million, but we only have 842,000 jobs in our county, right? That means a lot of county residents have to leave our county in order to work. And we know that we're one big giant labor market here in Southern California, and that lots of people, drive into San Bernardino from Riverside and LA and Orange County to work, and vice versa. But bottom line, our economic development efforts are really working and focusing on bringing more jobs here into our county so that more of our residents have options to work here closer to home. And I want to highlight that some of our different industry sectors, obviously, mostly the transportation logistics sector, which, no surprise, is one of the largest employment sectors here in San Bernardino County and the Inland Empire region. We did from 22 to 23, we did see a little bit of a decrease in the overall employment numbers in the logistics sector, about 3.7%, but that's kind of leveled off. We have seen some increase in 2024, but bottom line, we consistently, have about 130,000 jobs here in San Bernardino County related to the transportation and logistics industry. And what's interesting about that is I think we just all kind of automatically, when we think about the jobs in this sector, we automatically think of truck drivers, we think of forklift operators, warehouse workers. But the reality is there's so much more than that. And, you know, we have this bachelor's degree and professional degree kind of sector within the industry, and then also the sub bachelor, and the requirements and the certifications are very varied. But what we know, when you look at a distribution center, it's so much more than just, again, warehouse workers and forklift operators. There's a whole gamut of occupations and professionals that are in that building making that business function. And then what I want to highlight here is, because these last couple of years, a lot of our businesses have really struggled to find the qualified workforce they needed. So what you see here in this graph is reflected is a comparison of job postings versus our unemployment rate. And you can see there, the orange line reflects the number of unemployed individuals, and the blue line reflects the number of job postings. And this is across all sectors. But what I highlight is that in times when the orange line is above the blue line, then businesses in general have an easier time finding the workforce that they need, because there's plenty of people that are looking for jobs, and not as much competition. But in times where you see where the number of job postings is higher than the unemployment rate, then that's when businesses are coming to me constantly and saying, hey, we really need help, we can't find workers. And obviously we experienced that as we came out of the pandemic, and really up until just last year, we had way more job postings than people available to work. And so businesses did really struggle. But you see there, about a year ago, that flipped back, and so businesses are struggling less to find the qualified talent they need. Nevertheless, you know, we have a lot of on our plate in workforce development, helping ensure that our transportation logistics employers find the talent that they need. And so, next slide, please. You know, and part of that is, you know, one thing that my department does is we work with individuals and companies who are experiencing layoffs. And you know, so some of you may have heard of the WARN Act. Basically, that requires any business who's laying off individuals, they're required to notify me and my team, so that we can go in and begin to help those people and help that transition process and help them become reemployed as quickly as possible. And so you see there the number of WARN notices that we received over the last few years, and then the number of individuals who were laid off through those WARN notices. And obviously 2020 really stands out. You know, the world really came to a standstill at that time. So obviously we experienced lots of layoffs during that time. Thankfully, they were a lot of temporary layoffs. And so you see that the following years have really stabilized in that regards. We did see an uptick in the last fiscal year of 23-24 compared to the prior year, where we had about double the amount of warrants and employees laid off. But you know, that doesn't give me a lot of concern in terms of a looming recession, just because during that same time period, our unemployment rate has been so low and our job growth has continued to be so high overall. And so all those factors combined don't really give me an indication that our economy is in trouble or headed for recession. You know, just sometimes layoffs happen, and sometimes there's not really a good, strong reason why. But I did want to highlight that of those all those WARN notices that we received last year, only 5 were in the transportation sector, impacting 424 jobs. And so you can probably think about that, you know, what those were. UPS was probably one of the more significant ones that we had. The previous year, back in 2023, obviously we had the yellow freight layoff that happened, which impacted over 1,300 workers here in our county alone. So that was a big impact to the transportation sector. And also thinking back to my previous slide about the industry job growth, probably had a large impact in causing the job growth to slow down in that sector for that year. So next slide, please. And then, so I say all that to basically sum up, okay, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, right? Those are some pretty scary words for a lot of businesses. But when it comes to me and what my team offers, we really do try to be a great resource to our business community. And we've really been able to make a good impact for the transportation logistics industry over many years now. So I want to highlight just a few of the services that we provide and how we can help in this area. So, you know, we really help businesses with recruiting the talent that they need. And I always say, whether they need to hire 1 person or 1,000 people, we have the resources and the ability to help any business do that. And we help a lot of transportation businesses do that kind of activity. We also, I think Aaron mentioned the Veterans Job Fair that they just participated in. We were there as well. You know, so we do a lot of job fairs, and a lot of times we're organizing the job fairs where we have dozens of employers and hundreds or even thousands of job seekers attending these events who are looking for jobs. And I would say that probably a good solid 50% of the businesses that participate in our job fair and recruitment events are in the transportation logistics industry. UPS, FedEx, Amazon have all been great partners of ours over the years in those regards. Another thing that I want to highlight is training. We train a lot of people, and obviously training and our ability to train is always limited by funding resources. But I will say the transportation logistics industry gets a significant portion of our training resources every year. Just last year, we trained over 200 individuals to receive their Class A truck driver's license, and all of them went on to become employed and make a good solid wage here in our county. And so truck drivers have been just in significant demand. And if you look at the labor market data, that's one area that has just continued to see tremendous growth over the last years. And what's really positive, it's one of the higher paying occupations in the industry. And so that's something that we've been really willing and interested in participating in and helping our companies fill those truck driving jobs that they need to fill so desperately. We also have some really great partnerships with other training providers. We work in the high desert with their A&P program, which is more of an aircraft maintenance mechanics program, which is, again, one of those kind of maybe lesser known, not thought of as often occupations that are in the transportation sector. There's really a lot. Again, I said that it's just easy to think of only truck drivers and forklift operators when you think of the sector, but there's so much more. And we've developed some really great partnerships with private colleges and with the community colleges and the four-year institutions here in our region who really do a tremendous amount of work training the workforce that this industry needs. And over the last 5 years, we've seen over 75% growth in this sector in employment across all occupations. And when I look at the data, we're projecting continued very strong growth in the sector in these occupations over the next 5 years. The data that I'm looking at is projecting at least 25% occupation growth over the next 5 years in the sector. And so again, we're going to continue working with our training providers and partners to continue training individuals to fill these jobs. Another thing that a lot of our transportation sector partners really like to participate in is what I call is our on-the-job training program. So this is a program where we will reimburse a portion of a new hire's wage for a period of time, typically 1 to 3 months, and typically 50% of a new hire's wage will come in and we'll reimburse the business for that portion of the new hire's wage while they're trained on the job. And we typically do a few hundred of those on-the-job training contracts every year, and a good majority of those are with transportation businesses. And so it's a really great opportunity to take some of the risk out of the hiring process for transportation businesses as they hire the individual, and we offset the wage while that individual is kind of proven and tested on the job. And we've had some really great success in that regards. We also have a really good, strong, robust work experience program where we have a number of service providers on contract that serve as an employer of record, and we have the ability and opportunity to basically place a fully subsidized worker into a business that the business will train them on the job, but we pay for the wage completely. Our employer of record partner covers the liability, the workman's comp, all those other technical employer requirements, and the business benefits by getting, again, to test someone out on the job. And we really like it when that always results in the business then hiring that person on permanently on their own because they've proven themselves and have been able to get that valuable on the job training experience. So I know there's a lot there. I do also just want to highlight that we really do we help thousands of people get jobs every year, and again, a very large majority of those jobs are within the transportation industry sector. And so I know I've covered a lot, but I hope this is just the foundation of many dialogues, many partnerships that can be strengthened and developed, because I think the last thing I want to say is, so in the workforce development world, I'm faced with the reality of I need to help people get a job today. So meaning the vast majority of the people that I'm training for are for the jobs that we have today. And so when you think of how we can be more future thinking and think of the jobs of the future in the sector, I think that's where I rely more upon our industry partners, on the businesses themselves, to really work with us, develop training programs and curriculums that really are about the jobs of the future. But in an incremental way, because again, I need the people that I train today to get a job today. And so if that job that they get today can lead to basically put them on a career pathway that leads to something that maybe is more technically advanced, that is more of a logistics job of the future, then that is something that I'm definitely interested in furthering those partnerships in, especially with our great, amazing education partners, and especially the Leonard Transportation Center at Cal State, and some of our amazing community colleges that also have really good logistics programs embedded within them. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions or however, Dr. Collins, however handling questions.
Thank you so much, Brad. If we have any burning questions, we'll take them now. Otherwise, we can have them at the end of our speakers. So we'll move on to our next presentation. But before that, we'll do our next poll question. And for this, we have our second poll question. What do you think is the most effective way to attract a diverse new generation to careers in transportation? As we think about this turnover and how things are moving. I was actually traveling this summer without a car, so I was using a lot of different types of transportation modes. And one thing, and I'll have my speakers also have them think about this as we move forward, but I was speaking to a young man who was driving and said, you know, it's projected by 2029, so in about 5 years, AI is going to take over a lot of different jobs that are out there that might not exist anymore. And I'm not sure, not an AI expert, but I'm not sure if Todd will be around in 5 years. Todd, is your job going to be AI proof? We'll see, right? But we have some thoughts on that as well. So this future of transportation, how are we going, are these workers in this sector? What does it mean for automation as well as artificial intelligence for our sector? So something to think on. Okay, oh, you all answered the question before I even got there. So the best way is promoting opportunities. Promoting opportunities through social media campaigns, 5%, offering internships, mentorship programs, 11%, collaborating with schools and universities, 5%. And then we had highlighting success stories from diverse professionals in the field. And then we had all of the above at 79%. So again, it's a heavy lift, that list of items that we need to do and much that needs to be done. But there's a number of, I wouldn't call them threats. We'll think of them more as opportunities that need to be thought of and as we move forward. Okay, with that, we'll bring forward a great leader in the transportation field in the Inland Empire, Terry Bills, who is the Transportation Industry Manager for ESRI or ESRI. Terry, please.
Okay, thanks. And I appreciate the opportunity to address you this morning. If we can go to the first slide. And so I'm with ESRI. We're based actually here in the Inland Empire in the city of Redlands. We're about a $2 billion company. We have about 9,000 employees worldwide. We work with pretty much all of the major entities in the logistics arena. So we work with not only the ports here in Southern California, but globally. We work with all of the Class 1 railroads that actually move a lot of that cargo. We work with many of the larger trucking firms, and then certainly the logistics companies as well. So what I would like to begin, if we go to the next slide, because we do work with a wide variety of transportation companies, what I would like to start, there's a tremendous, really sort of upheaval, transformation, disruption that is going on in the transportation across all of those areas. And you know, as this quote really highlights, it's really going to be information that's really going to drive the coming transformation and the success in the transportation industry. And so it's really all about information technology, operations research, which I'll talk a little bit about, and then really understanding location. And that's really a critical piece, and I think why so many companies rely on our software. So the next slide. So we're very fortunate in Southern California that we really are a global city, a global hub, and really a global hub and a global supply chain. And so, as I mentioned, we work with the largest ports all around the world. The Port of Rotterdam, the Port of Hamburg, and Europe are really two of the largest. We work with the ports in China, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And what's really happening globally is the emergence of these very, very large global hubs. And so fortunately, as I mentioned here in Southern California, we are really one of those hubs. So about 40% of the containerized cargo, so roughly about 40% of our imports to the US come through the two ports of LA and Long Beach. And sometimes we're not really fully aware of the impact on our regional economy and really on our national economy of those two ports. And so just in LA County, there's about 160,000 workers. But what I'm going to point out is there's a wide variety of employment associated with all of this importation of goods. And so if we can go to the next slide, please. So, and this was actually, we did this a few years ago. We can update this. But what you're looking at, every one of those orange dots is actually a logistics firm in Southern California. So you begin to see not only just the huge impact on the regional economy, but really how large that span is. And so obviously you can see from the Port of Long Beach and LA going up to downtown LA, and then really coming east out to the Inland Empire. And that's really the bulk. But every one of those single dots is a logistics company. So for every one of those, we can tell you the number of employees at that location, and we can also tell you the amount of warehousing space, and if they're actually involved in warehousing as well. So if you look at every one of those dots, you really see the tremendous impact on the Southern California economy from those two ports. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So here in the Inland Empire, it's probably even larger, and certainly I think we've all, those of us that have been in the Inland Empire for a number of years have seen the tremendous growth in the logistics and warehousing. So the numbers that I have are roughly more than 270,000 people in the Inland Empire. So that would be both San Bernardino and Riverside County work in logistics and in transportation. And that really constitutes about 16.5% of all the employment in the Inland Empire is logistics related. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So this is actually looking at the warehousing space. Again, this was a few years ago. If we would update it, and we would probably see a lot more occurring on the 215 corridor south, going down into the Paris area. But again, every one of those, we know the location of the warehouses, we know the amount of warehouse space. And again, you can just see the tremendous impact of those two ports throughout Southern California. So again, the 40% of imports coming into those two ports and then really being distributed to other centers, particularly in the Inland Empire, for redistribution throughout the rest of the US. So next slide, please. And again, you can just really the density of warehousing throughout, particularly in the Inland Empire. I think we're all very familiar with that. So let's go to the next slide, please. So what I would like to point out is that we're really going through really the retirement of the baby boom generation, and we have a need to backfill a tremendous number of transportation jobs. And unfortunately, most people that are coming through high school and into college are really not aware of all of the tremendous number of varied employment in the transportation industry. And what I would say is that certainly, again, back to that point that the entire transportation industry is really going through a transformation. A lot of that is going to require new skills. And I think that what we need to do in the Inland Empire is really sort of plan ahead and how do we upscale our workforce and our really to handle the new employment and the new types of jobs that are really going to be required. So I just want to point out a few of those. So operations research, many of you may not have, it's really highly mathematical. But if I was going to advise anyone that was looking for a career that had reasonably good math skills, I would really recommend operations research. It's literally every business of any size has someone that is really looking at how do they optimize their supply chains. And so it's really operations research, supply chain management. And the average salary is well over $200,000 for those careers. And as I said, at Esri, we work with a lot of the operations research managers. They're really looking at how do they optimize global supply chains? How do they get their goods to market, or how do they import from any number of facilities worldwide, and how do they bring them to the US and then redistribute them to their locations? So operations research, supply chain managers, again, just for California, the average salary is about $139,000 for supply chain managers. Again, every company of any size will have a supply chain manager. Increasingly, warehousing is going to become more and more automated, requiring fewer and fewer workers. And what that means, though, is that there is a new set of workers that will be required, which is really warehouse management technology. And so people who understand the automation technology that will actually be the ones that were running these very, very large warehouses. And again, warehousing is really becoming ever more automated, ever more technology involved in the management of warehousing. And so a whole new set of technical skills that will be required. Same thing with transportation directors. Any company, and again, it's very similar to supply chain management or supply chain manager, but it's really looking at the very specific, what number of trucks, how do I move the goods? So again, and a logistics management specialist, again, some very well-paying careers, not all of them really requiring full college degrees, but these are some of the new types of skills that are going to be required, again, as we further automate, as we further apply technology, really to optimize the movement of our goods and services. And really a fairly large number of transportation careers that really don't require a college degree at all. So surveyors, again, the average salary here in California is about $109,000, or a surveyor technician about $90,000. A whole range of transportation jobs that, as I said, unfortunately, most people don't know about. So I think we we need to do a much better job about educating really in the high schools and in colleges about these career paths. Really quite and as my generation retires, how do we backfill with a much more diverse workforce? How do we attract more women engineers into transportation? More diverse workforces. So this is really, I think, the challenge ahead of us. And so, next slide. So again, to reiterate, I think we need to develop a much more diverse and technically trained workforce to really sort of fill these new emerging job categories. As I mentioned in transportation, the technology is moving so rapidly. We need to really look ahead, and we need to train workers that are flexible and that really are constantly looking at improving their skills and learning new skills so that they can keep up with the technology. And I think that, certainly the Inland Empire, I think some of the warehousing is sort of gotten a reputation as sort of low skill. But I think, again, as that becomes more and more automated, it's going to require higher skills. And I think what we really need to think about is how can we transform the Inland Empire? We are uniquely situated really to take advantage of the Southern California economy that's probably one of the most dynamic in the world. And how do we really raise the workforce in the Inland Empire to really play a much more significant role in that global hub? And so ultimately, that's really going to take, I think, a coordinated and a collaborative public and private effort. And so it's great to see that the sponsors of this series, we certainly work with HNTB. They do great work. They use a lot of our technology and really, and as construction is moving increasingly to digital, we call it digital delivery. And it's really taking a whole new set of skills. And so what we really need to bring the public and private together. And how do we lift and raise the workforce in the Inland Empire really to meet the challenge of being a global supply chain. And so I think, certainly from the Esri side, we bring in a lot of interns every year. It's not just in transportation, obviously, but I think the more that we can begin to look at these new job categories and skill sets, and how do we begin to really sort of build that energy and the nucleus of really building the Inland Empire as a greater part of that international hub. So with that, I think that's sort of my message. I think we have a unique opportunity in Southern California and in the Inland Empire, and I think we need to all come together to make sure that we're as successful as we can be. So with that, I'll pass it back.
Okay, thank you very much, Terry. All right, so that leads us to our next poll question before we get to our final speaker. And the next one is, which initiative do you believe has the greatest impact on improving employee retention in transportation careers? So implementing apprenticeships and mentorship programs, streamlining the hiring process to reduce wait times, offering competitive benefits and compensation, and fostering a supportive and inclusive work environment. And then we have all of the above. I know it's a tough group of questions this time. And then our next speaker will bring a whole nother sector of transportation employment that we have in our communities. All right, and our results, again, all of the above wins out with 63%. We have a fairly large list, followed up by offering competitive benefits and compensation at 29%, and then fostering a supportive, inclusive work environment at 6%. So again, I think these are difficult issues, something that we all wrangle with in our own organizations, and thinking about how and what does the future workforce look like. Yeah, and so now we're going to invite up our last speaker for today, Christine Glass, who's the Director of Human Resources here at Omnitrans. Thank you.
Great morning. I am a graduate from Cal State as well, so with my bachelor's degree, so I do appreciate ongoing efforts. Thank you. I worked my way through school. Appreciate that. Let's go back for a minute, right? What changed everything? COVID, right? Whether it was how the world changed or how we did business. And then if you go to the next slide, please. That instituted the Great Resignation, right? People started saying, where do I want to work? What do I want to work for? What's my priorities, right? So that started to change how we had to do business, how we had to look at things. We couldn't do things the old way, the way we always did it, right? The way that business was always done. You'd be grateful for a check and you just do it, right? That just wasn't working anymore. People were like, I could have died. What do I want to do now? What am I willing to work for? What's life about? So that changed how we had to look at business and how we had to look at employees. So this didn't just affect Omnitrans, this affected the whole world. And so we know this just changed how many people were in the workforce and what people were willing to do. People were scared. So in a public job, like being a coach operator, a bus driver, right? Do I want to do that? Is that passenger going to kill me, right? That's what we were told. Everyone was going to kill us, whether it was a family member or a stranger. And that's not what happened. Some people had some challenges, but that changed how we interacted with people. And so that's how businesses had to interact with employees differently. We had to change our priorities. We had to look at what was important to an employee. So unfortunately, due to COVID, we had a reduction in services. So we did some layoffs, which we thought were temporary because Matt talked about that, right? That everybody thought it was temporary. Unfortunately, a good portion of our employees didn't want to come back for whatever reason that was. So that put us in an interesting opportunity and challenge to figure out how to supply that service, because we were essential workers, but so were the people that needed to use the bus to get to their job. So it gave us a unique challenge, and we rose to that occasion. So working together as a team, we had to prioritize things differently and look at things differently. So we started working at ideas of innovating with community partners, as well as different parts of our agency, as well as our unions, to figure that out. Next slide, please. So we collaborated with San Bernardino Valley College and the Launch Program to create a maintenance mechanic apprenticeship program. Apprentices are a temporary employment for 1 year to 2 years. And upon the completion, they have an opportunity to gain full employment with us. We've gained some grant funding to help support us with that process. Most of our apprentices work 30-hour weeks as well as going to school. The schooling, Launch, and San Bernardino Valley College essentially pay for that piece of it, and then they have gainful employment with us during that period of time, benefits included. Currently, we had two. We currently have one that graduated and is now a mechanic helper for us, so that's a success story. The other one is soon to follow. We are planning on adding another one, so we'll have a total of 3 for this fiscal year. The Teamsters who are over our mechanics are supportive of the process because they're not actually in the union in the position. We're also connecting with high schools at this point to, again, make that pipeline for the zero emission technologies in the buses that we're using. So that's part of the training program at Valley College as well. So we've hosted a tour of 50 high school automotive children to come through and see if that's the thing they want to do. So they've had tours. We continue to partnership with them and other high school agencies to do that. This actually is Daniel, who became a mechanic helper for us. Next slide, please. So we've also supported our coach operators by creating a mentorship program in collaboration with our ATU, which is our union for our coach operators. This program is helping individuals who've never maybe even ridden a bus, let alone been a coach operator, to have an easier transition into the position. So imagine maybe you've driven a car before, but you haven't driven a bus with passengers on board, the weight of the bus and all of those things. So it's a helpful transition to have a veteran staff member seasoned enough to answer those questions for you, let alone transit's a totally different environment. So the language is different. How we get our shifts, how we conduct business. So helping somebody understand that process is very helpful. That helps with employee retention, reduces accidents. It reduces just a lot of stressful on the part of people who've never worked in the industry before. We're currently expanding that program. They get job shadowing. They also, as I mentioned, help them figure out how it works. If you've ever worked in different industries, the language, the whole environment is completely different. So it helps individuals calibrate to that industry. So thinking about, we run from like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning to 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. So that means different shifts. If you've only ever worked in a business shift, you have to change your lifestyle. You have to change how you get to the grocery store. I've worked in all kinds of industries where, you know, you have different shifts. So you have to change that. And it's very helpful to have somebody to say, hey, look at this advantage, right? I loved going to the grocery store in the middle of the week when working on the weekends, because then there wasn't anybody there. So there are advantages to working in the shifts, and it helps people understand and navigate how to do that, how to help your family, and how to go to, how does the time off request work? How does all of that work? So it's very helpful to have a mentor to do that. And we're continuing to expand that program and finding the successes in it, even though, like it says, we just started it this year, we're already seeing the success in it. So that's the fantastic part of that. Next slide, please. So in changing the way we do business, we also have to change the way we recruit and select individuals. So we've had an increase since 2021. We've hired over 500 employees. And this year alone, the fiscal year 2024, we hired 192 employees and promoted 21. So that shows us growing our own, developing our own employees, developing the workforce so that we have what we need and making it happen. So that's another shift that I think some businesses haven't gotten into, is that workforce development piece, which Matt spoke about as well, and doing on-the-job training and helping people progress through the company. So thinking about Omnitrans, you might think a bus driver, right? And there's a career path for a bus driver, and there's a career path for a mechanic or a vehicle service worker, which is someone who cleans and gets the buses ready each day, super fresh. And they're different career paths, but we also have administrative. So we have career paths within different offices to move your way up. So we're so dynamic in what's available. There's so much diversity in what's available just at Omnitrans. So there's a lot of opportunities. I myself started as an employee relations manager, and now I'm the director of HR. So there's opportunities if we seize those opportunities and we develop employees so that they're ready and successful when they have that opportunity come available. So those are things that businesses have to continue to do. So when we talk about recruitment also, so in fiscal year 2024, the HR staff screened over 5,000 applications to be able to hire those 192 employees and promote those 21. So the amount that you have to go through to get to the result you need, yeah, I saw that, a couple of looks there. So you have to have an efficient way to do that. We've changed our recruitment process in the last 4 years, probably 3 different times. Depending on the position, we will do interviews and on-the-spot offers. We've done a staff bus events. We've done one at Cal State as well, where we will take a bus out there. We'll do interviews on the bus and offer positions if it's appropriate at that time. We've shortened our hiring time. So I know we went from 77 to 50 up here. Our industry partners are we're at like 145 when we were at 77. So we were already efficient, and we're becoming more and more efficient. We engage with candidates more often because you have to keep them engaged. They're just, the next thing, so it's constant contact. When we talk about that with customers, well, now we're doing that with employees, right? So it's that constantly engaging them, keeping them interested, helping them understand and transition into a new industry. So we do that as well. Let's see. So then our marketing department has done the strengthening our career path campaign, which if you could play the video, which is the little picture here.
I worked here at Omnitrans for 7 years. I started my career as a mechanic. A coworker brought up the tuition reimbursement program that we have here at Omnitrans. I applied at DCU, I got accepted. It took 3 years to get my bachelor's, but I was able to network with my director and tell her my interest about moving up to the IT department, putting my degree to use. I'm currently an assistant specialist in the IT department. I was thankful that Omnitrans helped pay for my degree. Hopefully I would have an opportunity to work and give back to Omnitrans as well. Omnitrans is more than a job. It's the path to my dreams.
So this is one of many videos that we have of different actual success stories from Omnitrans in progressing. So if you see, this is more of an untraditional path, right? He went from mechanic to an IT department. We also have the traditional path that I mentioned earlier. And so this has been successful. We have some wraps on our bus that is the career path. So we continue to focus on workforce development. We continue to focus on the culture within the organization because that's why people want to stay. And we continue to listen because we don't know everything. And I think that's a big takeaway from COVID, right? We don't know everything. We don't know how things are going to change. So we have to consistently have communication, feedback loops, and make sure that we're listening to what our employees need. So I think one of the biggest key takeaways for Omnitrans is flexibility and adaptability. And then number one to me is teamwork, because HR wouldn't be able to do all that we do without the collaboration from all the departments that we have here and the community partners we work with. Thank you.
All right, that was a great, I think, wrap up of looking at some of these issues around workforce development. And we have our final, very difficult question for you today in our poll question. But in order to increase the potential of the transportation workforce, IE leaders from government and business, it's all you, need to work collaboratively to build on the strengths of this industry sector and overcome its challenges. Just a little ballpark one hanging out there. It's almost our mission statement, our vision I want to leave you all with today, thinking about how we can work together and a call to keep it moving, keep it going. There we go. True. 100%. All right, cool. Everyone passed that question. I know that was an A question there. Okay, so then I'd like to open it up now and really start to talk about some of these issues as a community. So in thinking about what we heard today, I'll open up the floor. I always have lots of questions, but I'll open up the floor now and see if any of you have a question for our speakers.
Hi, Otis Gray with SBCTA. I want to thank everybody for speaking. I wanted to ask Terry a question about the data that that Esri is generating about the goods movement and the impacts of good movement through the Inland Empire. Is this data being used or requested from state officials, policymakers, as they make plans for the use of transportation dollars in the state? I think one of the concerns we have as a transportation authority is there appears to be a lack of understanding of the connection that goods movement has to our local and national economy that I think you pointed out. And movements to restrict capacity on mainline and arterials that create more congestion is thought of to be a good thing because it'll force folks to take transit, but you can't move containerized goods on transit. So I'm interested to find out if you're being sought out.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great question. And you do point out it. I think one of the big problems that we have in Southern California, excuse me, is that people really don't appreciate or fully understand the impact that really being a global supply chain, the amount of employment, the amount of really sort of energy that brings to Southern California. In terms of the use of the data, both, I guess there's a number of ways to answer that. The state of California does have the Employment Development Department. They have really sort of site-specific employment data. I'm sure that Brad actually has access to all of that, uses that in his work. We at Esri, excuse me, have our own data that we actually have been evaluated as the best employment data available among the major providers, and we use that data really to supply to our customers. So our customers are government agencies, logistics providers. I mean, across 60 to 100 different industries all rely on that information about where to site new stores, new locations, new warehousing, et cetera, et cetera. It's, I think again, back to the notion that it's information that's going to drive the future. I think what we also need are really data analysts to be able to analyze the data and really look ahead and understand those, whether it's mobility patterns. So for a public transit agency, mobility has been changing incredibly rapidly. And I mean, COVID really just fundamentally disrupted sort of traditional mobility patterns. Same with our supply chain. Our supply chains were quite significantly impacted during COVID. We all know that. At one point in time, there were 120 vessels sitting offshore from the ports of LA Long Beach because they didn't have enough workers and they didn't have enough space to really offload those vessels. So again, it's really information. And I think we need an increasing number of people who understand and know how to work with that information to make better decisions. But to your point, I think that, we don't really fully appreciate what the tremendous impact that the two ports have to create really what is now a global supply chain hub.
Maurice Manchin, Omnitrans. I have a question also for Terry, but I guess all three speakers can speak to this. You all talked about how transportation jobs are becoming much more technical in a sense. And do you see that the training is keeping up with the technical needs? I know Terry said a lot of the jobs don't necessarily need degrees, but the transportation employee will have to be a lot more technically inclined. So I'm wondering if that gap between the training we're doing currently is keeping up with the technology that we're going to need for the jobs.
Yeah, again, I'll start and then Brad and others can, but I think there is a gap, quite frankly. I mean, we at Esri have a tremendous problem hiring, finding the number of workers that we need. We actually have over 1,000 open positions annually at Esri that we have a devil of a time filling, and we're just the same with I mean any number of businesses that I work with, and increasingly I think we're going to have to do exactly what Omnitrans does, is that we're going to have to bring people in and we're going to have to up train them to fill these positions. And so really my hat's off. I think Omnitrans is doing a great job in that, and I think we need to, more and more companies need to think about how can we bring people in and how can we train them and upscale them really to meet those challenges, because it's really a digital revolution that's occurring across most businesses, and the demand for those technical skills greatly exceeds the supply.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in, and I agree. I think the schools education can only do so much. I think experience. I talk to a lot of businesses in all sectors, and experience is king. A degree, a certification will only take you so far. And so I think that's why a lot of us, and I really liked hearing what Omnitrans talked about with their apprenticeship program, because I really think apprenticeships, internships, on-the-job training, work experience, though that's the wave of the future. And in order for that to work, we have to have strong industry partners who are willing to basically open their doors to those opportunities and really take an active role in developing their own workforce. Because if we just rely on the public education system to do it for us, it's not going to be enough. And so they're a critical piece of it, but we have to have that on the job element in order to move forward.
So I think that the point about education is important, but the practicality of experience is what Brad was speaking to. And that's what the apprenticeship program or the mentors actually help with as well. The challenge that we have is that the technology is so new with the zero emission buses and how it works and things like that. So that's an opportunity that we have a little bit with Valley College, because they have 2 classes for those particular things, but we're still learning. Like we have 4, fuel cell, and we have battery electric, and those are different, and the ranges on them, and how to, there's some parts are a bus is a bus is a bus, and other parts that's not. So it's finding that, and then working with the vendors who are supplying those to us and providing that training and things like that for our staff. So we have, so Vicky, who's in the room, is our technical trainer. So she's helping with the mechanics, learning those portions and scheduling that for the vendors to come in and do those parts. So in that sense, that's a challenge and an opportunity. Also, though, that's going to do the trickle down effect that the other speakers were talking about, which is that also changes how you do the administrative part. That's also changing the other parts of how do you drive a bus differently that is not a CNG bus. So, battery electric, it uses more energy to how fast you go or how you stop, things like that. So that is a trickle down effect to the rest of the agency. So we continue to learn those things and teach and train. And again, we keep training up as that was spoken about.
Yeah, I did. Sorry. Just as a follow-up to Otis's question, I think having the data on what the infrastructure needs are would help agencies and the industry kind of advocate for those infrastructure needs. So I guess what my experience is, living here for so long, I used to see cars on freeways, and now I see a lot of trucks, right? And we see that everywhere. So do you have, it's probably, I guess, geared more towards Terry, but data that can help inform, like, what types of infrastructure is being used by these growing industries, and what are the needs as you kind of can project that into the future? Is there a way to advocate that for both even like the highway side and also the rail side?
We work with almost all of the state departments of transportation, and within Caltrans, for example, there is a intermodal division, and they really do focus on really sort of goods movement, how effectively and how can we more effectively move goods through not only California but across the country. And certainly, I think that we can't continue to add more and more and more trucks to our highways. We can't really expand the highways much more, and they also put a great stress on the highway. So we need to look at more effective ways, and I think that's from my perspective. I think we need to make a larger investment in rail, very effective way of moving goods, and certainly a lot of the creation of the Alameda Corridor and the Alameda Corridor East was reflected that. But I think we need to do a better job, and we need to look at just again, I deal with cities around the world, and I think everywhere else, really sort of public transport is really viewed as really the way it's going to have to be the solution to our future mobility, and we need to, I actually think we've grossly underinvested in our public transit systems in the U.S., and I think we need to look at as our congestion continues to increase, we need to figure out ways that we can make greater investments in public transit to move people and rail to move goods. So anyway, hopefully that.
Thank you. So we have a question up on Leslie Trainer on online. Leslie?
Hi, Kim. Thanks. Leslie Trainer, Cal State San Bernardino. Teach here, and I'm also a faculty fellow at the Leonard Transportation Center. But before my current position, I was one of Brad's counterparts at the County of Riverside Workforce Development. And so that's kind of where my mind goes in looking at this conversation. So my question, of course, is for Brad. I'm wondering, one of the beautiful things about the federally funded workforce development programs is that part of it focuses on those in the workforce right now. As Brad says, we want to get people into jobs right away, but we also look at the future workforce through the federally funded youth programs, which usually target young people ages 16 to 24. So I know in the past we've had challenges and interesting feedback from the young people in those programs about how they felt about certain sectors. One example was manufacturing, which is big in the Inland Empire. There were a lot of misconceptions about what that sector was like, and so as a result, there was a lack of interest from young people, and that's very concerning for building the future pipeline of workers in the sector. So Brad, I'm just wondering if through any of your youth providers, your WIOA youth providers for the County of San Bernardino, if you're getting any feedback about what young people think about coming into the transportation sector as a career, and the transportation sector in general. Are you getting any feedback from them about that?
We are a little bit, and you're right. That's something that really, of all the workforce programs that we have, I think our youth program is the one that is definitely the most future thinking, because again, we're working with our younger population. We're working with young folks who have, for whatever reason, many reasons, become disconnected from the labor force. And so the purpose of this program is to basically reconnect them and put them on a pathway to higher education and additional training. And we serve about 1,500 young adults through this program a year, and we put them in a variety of careers. Work experience is one of the main programs that we help them participate in, and I will say that the vast majority of the individuals that we put through our work experience program are in the logistics sector. And so it was interesting that you asked this question, Leslie, because I literally just heard from a youth just within the last week who basically said that their dream job was to work at Amazon. And I was kind of taken aback, by that. I'm like, oh, I mean, that's really cool, but you don't typically hear that. And but it made me think, okay, like why would this, but right, who are we serving? This was a young adult who grew up in poverty and has had a lot of challenges in their life, and for them, to work for Amazon, right? Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, depending on the day, that kind of thing. Like for him, the kind of the just association with such a big name was really attractive for that particular youth. So it's hard to really give you a firm answer because yes, for some, the logistics industry is seen as an attractive career pathway, and for some it's not. It really depends. But I think the main point of your question, Leslie, is okay. So how do we make the industry more attractive? And I think it's just going to happen naturally, as Bill talked about, as the industry becomes more and more advanced, and the jobs become less about picking items off of shelves and loading them onto trucks and driving forklifts, things like that. As they move away from that and become more advanced and more technological, I think that's gonna speak more to the way that kids think these days, that they like to be on computers and they like technology, and they like handheld devices, right? I mean, I've been in a number of distribution centers where the order pickers are walking around with essentially micro computers in their hands all day, and it's becoming very automated and very different. And so so I can see that being more attractive to our young adults in the future, but it's going to take some time. And I think also another part of it is just wages and benefits. As wages increase, because that's the other thing we hear from especially our young adults, is they want to make money, and there's not really a better way to put it than that. They just want to make money, and the more the better. And so so we know that they do job hop, that they will leave and go to another distribution center that pays them 50 cents more an hour. And so it's something that's a reality that the industry has to face, that they have to essentially compete for talent, and that the more they can do to offer a good comprehensive wage and benefits package, the easier time they're going to have to attract people to their industry. So especially now that they have to compete against fast food industries who now pay $20 an hour.
You did a fantastic job, though. Gold stars, Brad. But this is good. I think that's good, because I know with manufacturing, the feedback from the young people was very clear, which was, we are not interested. They imagine that sector as being something from like the 1930s and 40s, and so there's a complete mismatch between what it is and their perception of it. And it sounds like that is not the case with transportation. But I think something to be aware of is Brad's very good point, which is it is becoming more technological, and the young people are more in tune with that type of work. And so I think the onus is going to be on all of us in this literal and figurative room to make sure we are transmitting the message that transportation has these types of options for people.
And I will also say that the thing that the transportation industry does that's really cool in our area is, we don't have a huge, Fortune 500 presence, at least from an office headquarters perspective here in our region, right? But the transportation logistics industry does bring the Fortune 500 community to our industry, right? Basically, I mean, you name it, we have it here in our region, right? From a logistics perspective. And so, and that kind of stuff does matter to young adults, to be able to work for Samsung or for Toyota or for, whatever big exciting name is attractive. And the young adult that I mentioned, Amazon, right? That was a big deal to him to say that, oh, I work for Amazon was a really cool thing for him. So.
All right, thank you. So other questions from the room? I'd like to just ask a question, because we hear a lot about, apprenticeships, which I really think are great, on-the-job training, which is great. But from a university perspective, and again, this might be self-serving because I work at a university, and I also believe in sort of this Jeffersonian need to have individuals who are educated and understand how their communities work and how democracy works and all of those big ideals that are out there. I want to pose for our speakers, as others in the room, we think about education and how education's worked, and we've had a lot of conversations at Cal State about the future of education. What does our programming mean for this community? So I'm going to open it up a bit to some of our stakeholders who are sitting around this room. I mean, how do you see higher education, and particularly Cal State, who is an institution that's set up to train or to educate the future workforce and really be a part of how this community evolves and works in economic development standards? So yes, how do you see, the role of Cal State really being able to support? How can we build our curriculums to be more supportive? What needs to be done? And so thoughts on that. And I'll open it up. I'll start with you, Terry, if you have any thoughts on our position, and then Brad and maybe Christine.
Sure. Actually, I completely agree with you. I think that certainly if you look at Silicon Valley emerged because of the participation of Berkeley and Stanford, and it created, I don't know, so you might call it just a knowledge complex. And I think that that's really what we need to start thinking about. And the role of universities really, yes, it's to educate, but it's also to, I guess, lift the larger community. And so we at Esri actually participate pretty closely with the University of Redlands, and we actually have what's called a town and gown. And so we actually open up our facility, our auditorium, to speakers. We bring in speakers from around the world and invite the university, and we have a number of internships. We bring the students from the University of Redlands in. They give presentations. We critique them. We also do the same with some of the STEM high schools as well. I think the university has a unique role to play in the community, and I think what you're doing at Cal State is actually precisely what needs to happen. That how do we build this collaboration between the public and the private in ways that we can, like I said, how do we uplift the entire region in terms of being able to take advantage of this unique position that we have as a global hub? So I think, universities as well as the larger employers have an equal, sort of role to play in enriching the community.
Thank you, Brad. Any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. This is a cool subject. I think it could be safely argued that the Inland Empire is the logistics capital of the world. I won't even say just California or the United States, but arguably the world, right? And for all the reasons that Bill talked about in his presentation, and because of that, right? What better place, what better area to develop the technology, the innovation, the new way of doing logistics? What better place than to develop it and test it than right here, right? And so I think that's where I really see a strong connection with higher education is helping to innovate and come up with those new ideas, right? Just the way that Berkeley and Stanford did that for the Silicon Valley. Why couldn't Cal State San Bernardino and University of Redlands and UCR and all these other amazing institutions we have here in our area help to develop and come up with the, in partnership with business, come up with the future of this industry right here.
Thank you. And Christine?
I think the making it practical, right? So when I went to Cal State, I was fortunate enough to have many professors who were working. So the labor law class I took was so that piece of making it practical, not just theoretical knowledge of what was, being taught in the classes, but what does this mean when you get into a work environment? So I think that practical piece is going to help bridge the gap, because I know there's lots of talk out there as far as, will degrees be needed in the future and the trend and all of that. If we make it practical, then you learning it on the internet isn't going to be that piece that's going to help you, right? Reading books isn't just enough. It's how do I use it in a workforce and be valuable to an employer sooner, quicker, right? And that's the piece an employer wants, but that's also how an employee is going to be successful and feel successful and get to the next level.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think there's a special role for Cal State in this community, and really helping to bring forward and think about these new jobs, particularly in information sciences, technologies, supply chain management, logistics, management, and in my field, public administration. We have, if you look at the county and the cities, most of the employees have gone through the program that I teach in. So I think we do have a special role, and I'd like to enhance that and think about it more, and really think about how we can engage, though we do engage, but engage more with employers in the region. I think my dean has something to say on that.
And there's another element as we develop a more sophisticated society and technologies and a workspace, and several of you mentioned the upskilling. Not everything is a degree, and a degree is not necessarily going to prepare you for the next 40 years of your career. So many of us have had several careers, and I think we have to play a role in that too, in helping with upskilling the workforce at different stages in their careers. What you need when you are 22 is very different from what you may need in terms of upskilling when you are 32 or when you are 45. And that's something that sometimes we haven't done a lot of, both in employers and universities and institutions of higher education. But we have to be more open to doing that.
We do at HNTB, of course, we do the internship programs and we heavily invest in those. But that's where, students come to industry. One of the things that I think is a tremendous benefit, and you just hit on it, Christine, is when industry goes to the students. And whether or not that's a formal part of class time, whether that's the professor being also working, or even just opportunities for the students to engage in very open discussions about what a career path looks like for somebody with their degree, I think is incredibly valuable. So like I mentioned, when I taught, I was also working. So half the kids' questions were about, the students' questions were about the topic at hand. And half of them were just like, what did it look like to work for the first year? And what does it look like to even get a job? How do you find the right company to work for? And so I think that idea of having industry go, inviting them onto your campus is a tremendous benefit for the students.
Well, with that, I'm going to do a little plug. On October 29th, between 9 and 1 o'clock on our campus, yes, a service announcement, I'm planning the Leonard Transportation Center, along with the Watershed Resource Institute. Yeah, sorry, out of the College of Natural Sciences with geography. And we're going to be planning a joint session in which we want to have our students be able to really highlight some of the work that they're doing to leaders who are working around sustainability management careers. Because that, if you look at career fields in the Inland Empire and throughout California, it's one of the rising careers out there. And so I'd like to invite all of you and others, if you know anyone, to come and really engage with our students and think about these new types of careers that many students don't even know exist. And we were just talking about, being young. I still kind of remember being young, but in those times, when you're starting off, you don't really think, what are you completely going to do? You think, oh, what interests me? What do I want to study? What do I maybe want to work in? But it doesn't completely bring about that career field.
right? Our careers are developed in other ways, sometimes in holistic or in synergistic ways as we move forward with our lives. But, how do we get students to think about these careers? How do we get them to see that in a lot of transportation fields, of course, you need someone that's working on sustainability management, and water infrastructure and all the major utilities has sustainability management. Another plug, it just finally got published. We have a major study looking at the transition of the medium and heavy duty fleet to electric. And what does that mean for the Inland Empire? So again, finally, and I'll be sending out a note on that, but the full report is on the Mineta Transportation Institute's site, which is part of the Cal State's Transportation Center. So for the whole Cal State system. And again, thinking about the data that needs to be there and understanding the data, as many of our speakers have, or many of our audience members have said, and what that means for our community, and then building the leadership and the workforce that can help drive and think about, how do we move our community towards a more sustainable future? Because currently, I think many of us are concerned about the number of trucks, safety-wise. I know many of us feel a little unsure about there, but also congestion, pollution, so on and so forth. So it's something that, again, I hope you'll join us on October 29th. ITSL's doing a great job so far planning it, and we hope to have students there from our campus, but also from maybe some of the local high schools to engage with leaders in these sectors working around sustainability management. So it's an invitation, but also self-promotion. Okay, and we used a lot of the skills and a lot of the data that and the resources that Esri has, and so you'll see lots of nice, beautiful GIS maps that are within these reports. Other questions? Other thoughts? So my last question is, and I'll just throw this out again for everyone to think about, our speakers as well to respond to. So thinking about this transition and this change, so in addition to having universities be a large part of driving this, but also thinking about how do we get ahead of the technology, right? How do we make sure that what we're teaching in the classroom is always the most relevant? And maybe, Terry and Brad, if you have thoughts on how can we stay ahead of the game? And I don't want to criticize universities, but we're kind of reactive, and it takes us a long time. People look at us and say, so when is that going to be done? We're like, that'll be done in the next academic year. So that's looking at, 9 months, 10 months, maybe even a year away, calendar year. And a lot of folks are like, well, why does it have to take so long? But we are working at least a year out before we can even do something. So sometimes it's hard for us to stay ahead of all the technological advances. But I'll take this and think about, how do we, as industry individuals, or as working in the industry, as working in, again, the university sector, thoughts on how we can stay ahead of the game?
I guess, I'll start. I actually think creating lifelong learners is probably one of the most important skills that we can teach in the university. And so it's certainly in the technology field. I mean, I actually feel kind of sorry for our developers. I mean, they have to constantly be learning new development languages, new skill sets. And so it does require people that are constantly curious, constantly wanting to, sort of learn new skills, upgrade their skills. So that curiosity, lifelong learning, and really the ability to apply data and information to make better decisions. And sometimes I don't, good decision making isn't necessarily taught, but nevertheless, the more that we can develop those skills in young workers, I think that prepares them really for those future challenges. And it certainly in the technology arena, it is moving amazingly fast. So I'm actually quite relieved that I'm going to actually retire in the not too distant future, so I don't have to keep up any longer.
Thank you. Yeah, Terry, as a professor, we're always, new technologies are being introduced for us to put into the classroom as well. I understand that. Yes, and Brad?
Yeah, I'll just add, congrats. I think that's amazing. I wish I could say that I had retirement coming up soon for me. Let my predecessor, figure it out, right? But no, I think we've talked about it before, but I just can't reiterate enough. Just really strong business partnerships, making sure that businesses are engaged with education, with the workforce system, and that those lines of communication are in fact, because when technology does occur, when it does happen, it's going to happen in those businesses first, and so they're going to be the ones that are going to be leading the charge, and so they need to be in lockstep with us so that we can be as responsive as we possibly can, and where we can help them maybe come up with a customized training program or something that maybe is kind of outside the sphere of like you said, Dr. Collins, the academic process that can take years to get something in place, a new curriculum or a new program. So anytime we can partner with a business to develop a custom program that maybe it's not for credit, right? But so that it doesn't have to go through that process, and then we can be more responsive to the business's needs that way.
All right, thank you.
I thank you to Brad for talking about the partnerships and the non-degree programs and things that we can do that are not necessarily a degree that may take a little bit longer. And we can do things faster than just taking years and years when we want to. But I think something we forget is universities also have a research side, it's a scholarship side. And sometimes it's not only about adapting to technology, it's creating it. I remember working on expert systems before artificial intelligence back in the 90s, and incorporating that into classes, and now everybody's trying to catch up. And Terry was talking about Silicon Valley and the role that Berkeley and Stanford, and by the way, there are more people from San Jose State working in Silicon Valley than Berkeley or Stanford combined. We do create that future, and the best we can do is to work together with partners in public agencies and in business to create that future, to create that technology together that is going to take us to the next stage in transportation and in society in general.
Yeah, I just, I'm glad I got a forum today to talk about some of the issues that I think are important. So it's been great. Any other questions for our speakers before we let them go today? Anything? All right. Well, I want to thank you all for being here today. I know it's August, so folks are still having vacations and out and about, but it's been great to see you. And if you feel like you've missed anything, or you think that you need someone to see the show, we will have this up online where all of our dialogues are, and a lot of the issues that we've talked about today are there. And so I invite you to visit the LTC's website, which is just csusb.edu/LTC, where you'll see all of our research as well as these dialogues recorded, and the information that we've been putting forward to really think about the future of the Inland Empire, its transportation sector, and how, I know it's a big it's a big piece, but how it can be really working well for the folks who live here in this community and really bring about the best that we know that we have throughout our region. So with that, I'd like to wish you a very great day. Stay cool, and we'll see you at our next dialogue, where we talk about the connections between aviation and surface transportation in October. So thank you for being here.